Welcome to Hash It Out, a podcast built by data security experts. We decipher the data security landscape through honest conversations about today's headlines and tomorrow's challenges. Brought to you by Virtru. Let's dive in.
Welcome to this episode of Hash It Out. Today, Virtru CMO Matthew Howard and FutureFeed's Chief Security Evangelist, Stuart Itkin, break down CMMC for the DIB, architecture choices, timelines, partners and tools, and how to build real security, not just compliance.
Good afternoon. My name is Matt Howard. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Virtru, and I want to welcome everybody to another edition of Hash It Out. Today, I have the great honor of hosting my friend Stuart Itkin, Chief Security Evangelist at FutureFeed. Stuart, welcome.
Well, great, Matt. Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to see you again, and excited to kind of just catch up and compare notes. It's we chatted not too long ago and a couple of times over the last few years as this world of all things CMMC has been evolving. I know that upcoming in Florida from February 11th through 13th is an important conference called QECON, and that at that conference on February 12th, you will be moderating a panel called Architectural Approaches to CMMC. Kind of curious at a high level, what's that all about?
Well, I think the conference as a whole is really about educating defense contractors about the requirements under the CMMC program, and really educating them about the alternatives, the best practices that exist for being able to address those. And this is a session that really is going to kind of drill down into a number of the key choices that organizations need to make. Choices with respect to their IT infrastructure or the architecture, but also decisions that they can make with respect to service providers and even with respect to some of the tools that are available. For many contractors, it's really a journey that they're taking for the first time. And many of them don't know where they're going, and others aren't even sure where they're starting from. It's kind of hard to get to where you need to be if you don't know where point A and point B is. And this is really a conference to be able to provide people that background and certainly to educate them about the alternatives, the tools, and the support that's available to them.
So, I've been, following, I would say, tangentially, maybe sometimes closely, the evolution of CMMC for the last few years. And, I'm not nearly as close to it as you are and don't have nearly the expertise and history that you do with such matters. But I'm curious, thinking about the DIB, and learning about it over time, it is a predominant, 80+% of it is kind of small and ultra small business. I mean, so much of the DIB is really small business. And I mean, it's hard for small businesses with limited resources to do a lot of things. I got to imagine it's really hard for small businesses in the DIB to kind of get grounded around CMMC. Is a lot of that true? And how much of this is just kind of a challenge of, enabling small businesses to see the big picture in simple, clear ways that kind of allow them to go, to your point, from A to B to C along the CMMC journey?
No, absolutely. The requirements or the underlying requirements for CMMC that exist within NIST 800-171 is a combination of technical requirements and non-technical requirements, but they're very specific and they're kind of wrapped in a lot of compliance speak. They're wrapped in a lot of technobabble, and kind of the small business owner who knows how to fabricate a particular part or to design certain things or to do construction knows what they know how to do really well. But they're certainly not a compliance expert, and they're not an IT expert or an information security expert. And, that's why approaches, tools, pre-built solutions that really reduce the complexity for these organizations, that take the cost out of it for these organizations, and simply, avoid the need for them to have that expertise internally that they're really not going to be able to afford or in some cases even find.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it's like, you think about every business in America, whether it's in the DIB or not, and there's kind of three types of businesses. There's the ones that have the big sophisticated IT department with the chief information security officer, the CTO, the CIO, and lots of resources. I'll call that resource rich. Yeah. And then you have sort of resource constrained businesses where they have people, but they're just not enough, and they're just trying to figure out how to make ends meet. And then there's the kind of IT less, which is those smaller organizations where literally IT is not a competency that exists in the business. And to the extent that that's a significant portion of the DIB, organizations like QECON, the conference itself, folks like yourself and the panel that you'll be moderating are such a critical resource just to kind of give all three of those organizations sort of context with respect to what's really at stake in terms of just making basic decisions to kind of get your house in order around basic governance, basic control to protect, CUI and sensitive information in the best interest of the country. As you think about that, what scale of 1 to 10 kind of, where like 10 is we are like fully processed, ready, mature, kind of to hit the ground running with all things CMMC. 1 is, the world is still kind of on a journey to kind of get their heads wrapped around it and figure it out. Where would you put us collectively as an industry at this point? Are we a 3, a 4, or how would you grade that?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think we're closer to the bottom end of that scale than we are to the top end of that scale. There were a lot of people that were non-believers, felt this program would never come to fruition. There's others that said, well, they were going to wait until they saw these requirements come in. What they don't appreciate is just, the time that's involved, the expertise that's involved in being able to bring their organization into compliance with these regulations. An organization that is really starting from ground zero, may take between 12 and 18 months to get to the point where they've built an environment that is compliant, where they've put in place the policies and procedures and are following them that enable them to be compliant, and that they've gone through the steps to be prepared to go through the C3PAO assessment that's going to be necessary for them. So, unfortunately, I think that there's more work to be done by organizations within the defense industrial base. And again, it really accentuates the need for solutions that make it easier, make it less expensive, and take the risk out of it for them.
12 to 18 months, that sounds like a long time. That sounds kind of daunting, if I'm honest. If I try to put myself in the shoes of like a small business just trying to, quote unquote, make ends meet, and an IT constrained or IT-less organization, I'm looking at 12 to 18 months. I mean, it just feels like a lot. Can it be shorter? Can it be 6 months? Can it be 3 months? Is it possible? Or that's my first question. Can it be shorter than 12 to 18? That sounds like a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are ways that it can be reduced. Again, as I said, this is a journey that people are taking for the first time. And one of the things they can do is they can find a guide who's been in that journey before, who can kind of lead them and take them through the process. There's the option of using managed service providers who have pre-built solutions. They bring pre-built policies and procedures that can be tailored to that organization. And those are certainly the kind of steps that will reduce the timeline, will reduce the cost. And these are all things that we'll talk about in the panel. And certainly architecture is a big part of it as well. There's a lot to be able to put together an IT environment that really provides the security that's required to ensure that access is controlled effectively, and to ensure that there's no means of just being able to, for data to exfiltrate from that system. So certainly, pre-built solutions that have been purpose-built for the requirements of CMMC, again, are all things that make that journey a little bit faster, a little bit easier, a little bit less expensive for organizations in the DIB.
So a couple of things on that front. So I want to just kind of get your thoughts on this, people, process, technology. I mean, I think you've said this many times before, and a ton of truth to this. I mean, when you just think about like, okay, I'm an organization and I have good governance and control with respect to CUI and, basic competency around IT systems. My people know how to use it. They know what to do. They understand the regulations. And then I have a compliance regime that allows me to sort of check a box and, have a conversation with a C3PAO auditor and pass an assessment. So people, process, and technology. When you think about the lift of going from, maybe 0 to, passing a level 2 assessment with a C3PAO, Is it a third, a third, a third? Is a third of it kind of getting your people up to speed? Is a third of it getting the technology into place? And is a third of it kind of process, or how would you kind of equate that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think a third is probably about right. Again, it's not about being compliant; it's about being secure. And one of the misnomers is that this is a cybersecurity program. It's not a cybersecurity program. It's an information security program, and the recognition that information can exist in several forms. Not only is it digital or virtual, but information can also be physical, and ensuring that physical information is protected, access is protected, just not to the IT environment, but also to the physical environments in which controlled unclassified information is going to be handled. And so it really is about ensuring that the policies are created that are going to provide the hygiene that's required, the security that's required, and that people, in fact, are following those procedures or adhering to those policies, and an organization has documented it. The assessment that an organization is going to go through is not just a matter of saying, hey, show me your system security program. Let me see that you've come up with a way of addressing these requirements. It's not only having the description of what you're doing, but it's being able to demonstrate that you're actually doing what it is that you've said, and that what you've said is actually working and producing the outcome, and that you're achieving the level of cyber hygiene that is expected to be able to protect the sensitive information with which the Department of War is entrusting you.
Yeah. So that's understood. I mean, I think you said something there that I want to, pull on a little bit, which is, it's not about compliance, it's about being secure. Not to sort of be, contrary for this conversation, but I certainly have encountered a lot of folks in the last few years looking at this big picture and sort of saying, no, I'm just trying to check a compliance box. And, whether or not security is really the point is perhaps neither here nor there, because I just need to get compliant. I just need to pass an assessment, and I'm not really that concerned about security. And I don't think that's often, the case, but it's sometimes the case. And I do think there's a difference between what we would call compliance theater and real security. I'm curious to kind of get your take on that. Is it really about security, or is it about compliance, or both? It's an interesting question. I'm curious to get your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly the intent of the program is about security. It's ensuring that the sensitive information that the government produces, that defense contractors produce, does not find its way in the hands of our adversaries. And there's only a number of documented cases. One that gets pointed to quite a bit is the F-35, which took a decade to develop, and in 2 years, the Chinese had a J-32, which was, for all intents and purposes, a carbon copy with the same design flaws that existed in the F-35. The security is important to maintain the technological advantage that the United States has had. It's about national security, and I think the big challenge is getting people to develop that security mindset, rather than looking at this as compliance theater. It's interesting. I think we're going on 3 years ago now. There was an incident where there was a weather balloon that was just kind of floating across the United States. And every time you turned on the news, articles and stories about people wanting that shot down, and how can we allow the Chinese to attack us in that way to try to steal information? And yet, there are probably tens of thousands of cyber attacks launched by China every single day, and we don't seem to have the same outrage, the same concern about it. And I think there's, people can understand the things you can see, touch, feel, that you can hold in your hands, but those things that are invisible, the information that may exist in the cloud, the information on your devices, is just something that people can't get their arms around and appreciate the value of it. And this is really what the program is about, is to ensure that it is about security, not about compliance.
Yeah, no, it's well said. And we certainly agree with that view. Ultimately, you're going to have to, back to people, process, technology, train your people. You'll have to have the process defined to kind of get to the outcome with respect to an assessment and an audit.
Right.
And then at the same time, though, none of that really matters unless the information itself that you've been entrusted with is being governed and protected in a way where it's not being, sort of stolen by state actors like PRC, because ultimately that's where the rubber hits the road. And from that perspective, it's really exciting to see you hosting this conversation down at QECON in February in Orlando. Well, maybe one last question, kind of like for the benefit of this quick preview, like what are you hoping to accomplish with the panel, and who do you have on it?
So we have I think, a really good panel. Noel Vestal from Aethon Security. They are both an MSP, and Noel is I believe, a lead assessor. Dave Bedard from KTL, Toby Muster from the MSN Group, and Peter Nancaro from Virtru, all on the panel. And the objective is really to kind of lay out some of these choices that are available, some of the alternatives, and letting people understand kind of where they fit best. It's not a one size fits all. When one may look at and say this approach really works better for the type of business they have than perhaps another approach. So we want to make people aware of what the alternatives are. We want them to understand the trade-offs between those alternatives, and to educate them to make really an informed decision about which may be the best approach for them to be able to pursue.
And cost matters a lot.
Absolutely. Cost is always important.
Yeah, for sure. Well, as someone who's, sort of, watching, from, with great interest, the evolution of CMMC and our, country's ability to protect, QE in the context of the DIB, it's really great to see the ball is moving forward. The train is rolling, that's for sure. There's a journey yet ahead, but conferences like QECON and panels like yours are an important part of just keeping everybody, I think, up to speed and informed and honest about, how you're going to get there. And I think the thing you said that's most important is, there's lots of options, and those options are on the table, and you have to just, to the extent that you can assess the options as someone in the DIB and make the best choice for your business, then that's what matters most. I mean, and getting to a place where that information is then subsequently controlled and secure, aligned with the intent of the program, everybody wins. The U.S. wins, you win as a company in the DIB. And we win as taxpayers and citizens of the country. So thank you for organizing that panel and for hosting it. I know Peter is personally excited to participate in the conversation, and we're certainly looking forward to being at QECON as well. So great to see you, and thank you again for taking the time to join us today, and best of luck in Orlando.
Well, great. Absolutely. Matt, thanks very much, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a 5-star review and don't miss us the next time we hash it out. Like, follow, and subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, all linked below.